Here we are, Lipan, Texas, Mr. Patrick Smith's house with Mr. John Dowdy from Equinety. Just kind of organized this great group of extremely talented individuals that also very respected for their horsemanship and insight into horses. We have Justin Briggs, one of my really good friends, professional rope horse trainer, barrel horse trainer, everything trainer. Mr. Wesley Thorpe, also one of my really good friends, world champion team roper. Mr. Trevor Brazil, name speaks for itself, King of Cowboys. Mr. Miles Baker, also one of my favorite people in the entire team roping industry, one of the greatest head horse trainers I've ever seen. Mr. Patrick Smith, two-time world champion, also very respected horseman and one of my favorites. So what I would like to know on the beginning start of this deal is from the beginning of the rope horse industry to where we are now. What's the thing that you guys have seen? Where do you feel like this is going?
We're having these conversations because the level of horses and the competition over the last 4 or 5 years, you know, you're on a young horse, no big deal. Like, no, it doesn't matter now. Like, we've seen
catch your way through them first.
Yeah, completing the course, you know, was a big deal at first.
Yeah.
You know, just not any major mistakes, and now it's you better have some pluses on a lot of maneuvers if you're gonna
There's going to be so many nice horses that are bred for this now that like the quality of horse has gone up to where the only thing that really does set it apart is the run and who's roping on it and the training when it's all said and done, because everything's bred good. Everything's built to be an athlete. They're built to be an athlete now. And now it literally comes down to who can do the best job showing that athlete.
Yeah.
The quality's there. Pretty interesting.
As many runs as they're watching too, the beginning and the end.
Yep.
I mean, yeah, the showy ones and the getting hold of a cow, yeah, that's going to stand out. But as long as they stay with that cow and don't do anything terrible, but then they snap around, that's the last thing they saw. They snap around and get still. I mean, I think.
And I've seen a lot of
watch-
evolution, like you said, in the corner, like to where it's not as much
Slow down.
about like dragging a leg and like making like a super like big expression with your horse. I mean, if they can do that and handle the cow, that's one thing. But I think that what that horse is doing to the corner of the cow is important to keep it practical for what we're training these horses for. You know, and the end goal is to be able to make
the steer
make it easy.
healable.
Yes, yeah.
Like it's
Is
a
there
timed
steer
event when it's
healable?
all said and done, and if you're dragging a leg and whipping the steer, like you're not setting yourself up for success in the future.
There was
Like,
one they scored really good last year that I thought he just stood out because he kept the shoulders up good. Not extra flashy, but like he kept the shoulders up good, handled them all the way through the turn, finished good. But he's one that I think year one we might not have, he wouldn't have stood out and scored as high. But now it's almost like they're looking more user friendly and what you can get through roping on and win at every level. So I thought it was a little bit more that way. It's getting more and more that way to where it's kind of what is user friendly long term in a sense.
Well, the biggest thing with it is like a futurity is supposed to be what sets the horse up for a future. That's why it's called a futurity. And if you're training horses to just go to their 6-year-old year and then kick them out in the pasture, you're not really gaining much. But if you're setting them up for longevity, like you guys are talking about, for the career they're going to go into after their futurity life, that's what you want to see. And I feel like the judging kind of needs to reflect that in the long run. Like we don't need to be training a show horse. We need to be training a jackpot horse when it's all said and done, that can go to an open caliber guy, or horses that don't fit the open caliber can go to the bigger market in the team roping industry, which is people like me. That's the biggest market.
I just like hearing that the sport's evolving into making the steer healable.
Yeah.
That's my favorite part of it.
Yeah.
It might have been born in the wrong generation.
Trevor did comment the other day. There was a few hill horses that like they would let guys take 4 or 5 swings over their back, and he said, "Man, Patrick could ride that one."
I'll tell you, I have noticed a difference in like what y'all are talking about though, as far as the way the run's setting up. It's the same way rodeoing. Tanner and I have been talking a lot about somewhere in the last 5 or 6 years, there's been a shift of the coming back deal, and the deal where you're trying to get a horse to really drag a leg and come back. And I am a little bit old school, but I've studied this enough to know that you can never take that out of the run. You can never take out getting a hold of the steer, slowing the run down and stuff. This stuff, so many of these guys are getting to where they're pushing out in front of the cow. And yes, it does happen faster, but as far as from a healer's perspective, it's a whole nother game when you start stepping in front of the cow and things, even though the steer's getting turned, but they're running like that.
It's not a sustainable run.
No, and there's no way to control. Every steer has control of the situation at that point. Their speed, the jumps, the speed of their jumps, all that stuff come together. That's what Trevor always did so good, was the control in the corner through the turn. You know, like rodeoing, he would slow down no matter what the steer was doing. I knew roping with him that he was going to try to, even if it took a little longer. I think that's why he roped with me, because he could take longer. But even if it took a little bit
This
longer,
guy needs
he
a
was going
minute,
to make sure that he controlled the jumps of the steer, and I think that's what people are losing. And I think the horse show industry is doing the same thing, about trying to just eliminate all wasted motion, but also, like you said, breed them, train them to where they can lead there, and then somebody can get on them and actually go compete on them.
Yeah.
At the end
You
of the
people
day-
that don't know Patrick probably thought he was trying to compliment me, but me, knowing he's setting me up for something right here, it's not a compliment.
I think at the end of the day, control is the most important thing in win. Like, even people say team roping's gotten faster, rodeos, etc. And at the end of the day, like, Patrick and I buddied quite a bit, and like when we'll sit down and watch the runs, like the guys with the most control and that can have the most control of the horse through the turn, slow down to be fast, like that never changes at any stage of the sport. So I think the futurities are getting better that way, to where it is narrowed down to who's got the most control in the horse, who can set the run up, slow down to make it, you know, to where it is a long-term run. And the guys that are the most sustainable in the rodeo world, I think, is that have the most control of their horse.
That's a great point. With you two sitting back watching just rodeo runs and watching slacks and everything like that, like, and even take your own careers into consideration, like, is there a time, because from the outside looking in, it looks like horses are mattering less and less because people are so handy with their ropes. But do you think that those great horses still make a big impact in what
No.
y'all are doing on a daily basis?
No doubt. And I think, like, I call it squeaking by. Like, there's a lot of guys that are talented that can win, and like they'll have a good year, and that year might give them a momentum enough to go into a good 2 years, and then they might have 3 years. But a 10-year run, like being able to back in there, see a start, turn, steer after steer, set up the handle up good, and like be able to win jackpot rodeo daily, day in and day out, like that never changes with like the great horses. And I think that's, I mean, the guys that dominate, I think, see the value in that, and the guys that are lazy about that, or getting their horses the best, or going to that next, it's just, I mean, in the summertime, you know, that's because you're competing the most in the summer. I mean, the winter, you can kind of go home, mend the fence, go back, try it again, go home, mend the fence. In the spring, you know, a little bit of run, you come home and work on it. But when in the summer, when you're just constantly gone, and like you really, all the bad is exposed. So I think whenever you're riding that wave, it's just up and down and up and down. And like, I think when you start messing up good steers, and you start, you know, rodeos that you catch your way through, and that you start having holes in it, like that's where you really truly see the stuff that's not sustainable. And I think that's what separates the dominant guys from the guys that just scrape through and you hear their name for a year or two and then they fade off. I mean, I just think that at the end of the day, the control and a run that's sustainable, and a horse, making a horse that's sustainable, and knowing how to keep your horse together, and what to look for and what the next horse is. I mean, I think that as much as it looks like that, you know, team roping's changed, it really hasn't at the basics, because if they make the setup easier, the times are supposed to be faster. But a good horse and a good run is going to be just as fast from the guy that threw from the back of the box and didn't have any control.
Well, I was going to kind of tap into like basically what you two are saying here, and from an outside looking in perspective, and you guys have known me as several people of drivers and been on the road and studied it. Like, the people that were in the top 10 always were riding the best horses, and they were not the gunslingers. They were the ones that set up runs to win fourth at every rodeo instead of winning first at every 5. And the consistency is what played out in the long run. And like, obviously, you know, I did work for a gunslinger, and you saw that side of it, but he was kind of always in the bottom. It's hard because the consistency does play into it. And when we're making horses in this futurity world that set people up for consistency, I don't know if people have really tapped into what the futurity world can do for the higher end of team roping right now. Like, it actually has a potential to grow 8s, 9s, and 10s like nobody's seen before, because people are going to work on the fundamentals and the consistency to get them to that point.
Well, there's a demand, so that's what I've got a 10-year-old son who already, at 10 years old, has spent 3 years of his life reaching on the dummy. And when I was younger, you got in trouble for that. You know what I mean? Like, if T. Woolman saw you, or Jake Barnes, I mean, they were like, hey, that's cool that you can do that, but we're here to win. You can't make a living doing that. You make a living by riding your horse, keeping things working. But the demand on so many one-headers, so many fast setups. I mean, there were times last year we went to some of the South and North Dakota rodeos. They got 110 teams, one-header. You better have that in your bag because regardless of how fundamentally correct the run was, it only takes 8 of them to take all the money spots away. So some of the ugliest runs win. So these guys, the demand on these guys to be able to throw from the back of the box, to be able to throw so fast, has gotten so many of them good at it that now the demand that separates them is now who can do it and control it every time. And that's Tanner Tomlinson, kid I'm roping with, going in to the national finals rodeo. I literally told him about, I need you at 70%. If I can just get you geared down to 70%, because as fast as you can go and as good as you are going fast, that does not work out there. If you want to be the guy that goes out there and turns 7 of the fastest steers that's ever been turned, and I might catch 3 of them if I'm lucky, and you get a pat on the back that talks about how much you would have won if your partner would have caught, that's great. Because I've witnessed that so many times with headers that go out there and they just get it in their mind that I'm going to turn this steer for first. But just by him slowing down, I said the run has to happen out in the middle. You can still win out in the middle. And I think that what's happening is I've noticed the change in him. Your partner, Tyler Wade, I've noticed the change in him. They've always been good at going fast, but now they're starting to consider, man, if I can keep my horse
Their
scoring,
horses are all
controlled,
up,
shoulders.
like, even
Yes.
Wade, all his horses, like practicing with him, I mean, they're all super forgiving. Like you
Yes.
read, they'd never step. And like I think, and me and you talked about this a lot, but I think the biggest thing to me, it has to get put on the saddle horn going north and south.
Yes.
Like you need to be going down the arena, like before your horse steps, it's got to go on the saddle horn. Because it's almost a guaranteed after that, you can't do too much wrong. But if you do this, it's almost, it's 50-50, 30-70. I mean, who knows what's going to happen. You're going to give the steer back. It's going to short hop you.
Yeah.
Whatever. There's all kinds of things that could go wrong if they ever get to that point when it's stuck on the saddle horn. So I think you're right. I mean, you do have to know how to use your rope, but the control is the main thing in the corner, and being able to stick it on the horn at the right time and being able to use your horse.
What's evolved just through the studying and the videos and all the stuff that we're able to do now is just because you got out of the barrier and you turned the steer left really fast does not mean you did a good job. And I think that's what's changing is they're starting to understand the jumps and the importance of setting a run up, controlling the steer's jumps, making it heatable like y'all were saying, or controllable through the turn. And that's where I think with what you're saying with all these futurities, that's starting to evolve. The judges are starting to evolve into that and change the way they looked at things instead of how it was 15 years ago. That it's really just about shaving off any wasted motion. What is the smoothest, most controllable, fastest way to make this run happen?
I'm just going to use like Drigger's run from the American as example. Like that was maybe one of the prettiest show runs I've ever seen, and they won the American.
Yeah.
And I mean, he just did everything correct, and the transmission did his deal, swapped. I thought that was one of the prettiest team roping runs I've ever seen, and they were fast.
Yeah, 3.
Yep,
Yeah.
and it was because of I don't know, I'm not saying it was because of, but I think the foundation of the futurities, and I think it does kind of start creating a little bit more consistent foundation where you're thinking about riding the horse instead of just going fast.
Well,
That's-
for me, like growing up, like all I did was like my granddad trained horses, raised horses and stuff, but I was only interested in competing. Like all I want to do is compete. I mean, I didn't even see the light in the tunnel on any of that stuff. But the older I got, like it forced me into realizing like, hey, there's a whole nother world that like you've got to master if you want to be in the game long term. And I think it goes back to the futurities. Like it works good for me because I'm always looking for my next horse, but I can season him along the way while I'm taking him, see where he's at against his own age group. And then they're almost ready sooner because I'm picking better minded horses. So they're ready soon. Like I'm rodeoing. I mean, I won 20 grand this month on a 5-year-old that won the 4-year-old deal at the Futurity last year in Fort Worth. So he's already worked into my string. And then I got a 4-year-old that I'm wanting to haul, but it's a little bit too young for that. But it's already working me into where these horses that fit that are what I'm competing on, and it's evolved into that. So like I never came from that growing up. Like I was wanting to compete so bad, go as much as I could. Where now like it is, you have to be focused on this side of it to even have a career on the other side.
It's offering a controlled environment to season your horses. Like you don't have to take them to the buck and duck anymore. Like you can go to a futurity and you can make your investment back off of them and not blitz 50 steers a night. You know what I'm saying? And exactly what you're saying. You get to kind of compare and contrast them against the peers, and personally see where you feel that horse is at to go take them on the river. And I think that's what's really cool about the Futurity business in general is just it's offering a controlled environment to season your horses and make money at the same time.
Take a guy like me, I'm showing in the intermediate. All right, well, I'm not going to go to the opener open and compete against you guys. I don't have a chance. Like, I know that. But I can go to these futurities, I can enter the intermediate. It gives me a chance to go rope against you guys, which makes me elevate my game. Even though I have to do that prep work at home, but because I've been to several, I know how to prep at home better. I'm like, okay, I got to rope this way. But also, like where a lot of people are scared to enter these futurities because they're like, well, I can't beat Trevor, I can't beat whoever. It's like, well, no, if you have an undeniable horse, it's a judged event. But the value of a good horse is, okay, I can't cover up certain things with my roping, that I've got to have that much better of a horse, even if he's not as good as yours. If he's better than most, well, then that helps me compete against you. Or
What is the
whoever else.
intermediate for people that are listening?
6+ and under in the head and an 8 and under heeling at most. I think Royal Crown's different. It might be a 7+.
But they
heeling.
have those
Yeah.
those in place,
You know?
so that not everybody's going head to head in the
Right,
open,
and then-
you get to go at multiple pots.
Right.
That day that everything does line up,
Yeah.
you can beat anybody on a good horse.
Yeah.
And the draw was good. Your everything was smooth. You're going to get a chance at
Yeah.
double the money that an open guy gets.
And like, so at Graham the other day, I went second in the intermediate. I was 1 hole out of the main average. Well, I win 3 times my money just in the intermediate. If I would have placed last hole in the open, I win nearly 5 times my money, you know? And then just the kind of opens I'm more open in, a lot of people complain about steers. Well, to me, the better I got my horse trained, steers aren't really that big a deal anymore. Like, if we all got to rope the same steers and my horse is helping me read the play, then that's just helping me do a better job.
Well, what we were talking about earlier about how important this is and the progression of Wesley and Patrick talking about how they see the control out there playing into it. I can look back over my career, and not just team roping, but any event. I can tell you the reason why we have good years is that was the time that I had this horse during this period, or I had this horse during this period. Like it's all related. You know, a great horse. I had the same skill set on all those years. It wasn't like I learned how to throw more rope or do this or that any different. It was because I had this horse that was that much better at that time. And I think this futurity industry is helping put more of those out there in the public, and it's changed the way me and Miles look for prospects. We're raising them now because if we were getting them out of other disciplines, then we have to. They're taught a lot of useless information. You know, yeah, they ride and they do this, but like it seems like when they have been started with a rope horse as the intention the whole time, we have a far different product as a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old than we ever did before. I mean, to me, it's going to be so narrow and competitive when it comes to the future of this sport that I think that's why the breeding is going to be so important. And I think especially the head horse breed is really elusive right now, but it's going to be important, and important to start with them as 2-year-olds with that purpose in mind, because you can't repurpose a horse and beat the 4-year-olds that are competing nowadays.
What kind of time frame do you see from, with all this just starting, where you're literally training a rope horse, to where how much time is going by where now, like, there's just a massive amount of those horses that are trained specifically for that?
I mean, that's not a bad thing, though. I think it's 5 years. That's a personal opinion.
We have horses that would have won the 4-year-old deal in Fort Worth 2 years ago that have been trained since January that I haven't thrown them in the trailer
I
yet
haven't even thrown them in the trailer.
because they're not good enough yet to
Really?
win. Yeah, and I don't want to say not good enough, like they're trained.
Right.
But you take the talent as a factor, like the eye appeal, everything that goes into it, the run, you know, just where do they have any wow factor at? Why is this horse any different than this horse? You know, they don't have enough of it to go.
To go win at the level you guys want to live at.
Yeah, and 2 years ago, like I said, they could have won the 4-year-old deal at Fort Worth. It's just in 2 years it's changed that much.
Well, and you're paying your own fees, so you got to be
Yeah.
honest.
Well,
like,
yeah,
that's me.
that's-
I'm riding my own horses. I'm paying these fees. Like if somebody's paying you and you're like, hey, I want this horse to go,
Yeah.
and you know they're not quite ready, but they want him to go, and you go show them. Well, it's your horse, and it's $1,000 to go in or whatever.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, we have a good gauge for it at home because I can look at like those horses I'm talking about.
Yep.
And like if we put all of our 4-year-old head horses in a trailer and go, and every one of them makes 4 clean runs, this horse cannot beat these other 4. These other 4 will win first, second, third, and fourth in this barn. I'm like, well, if he wins 5th out of our barn, and then everybody else shows up with their best 1 or 2, they don't need to go.
But you've just said what's the best thing about our industry too. If we're talking about cutting, cow horse, racehorse, anything, any other discipline other than what we're doing, they don't have the infrastructure that team roping has. Like that horse that may be a little vanilla as far as expression goes, or not quite enough run, or a little too much draw or rate in this one. We have like that. We still, no matter how that horse ranks in the barn, there's a customer for him in the team roping, and maybe more of a unicorn for his customer than those great ones are for us, because like this guy only ropes once or twice every 2 weeks, and he needs to have a horse that he can trust. And sometimes that horse is the one that may not be placing at the futurities, but has a role in our industry.
And so, like, I kind of want to touch on my 3D format, and the reason I developed that was because of exactly what you're talking about right there. If we're only training and putting attention on open caliber horses, but the market is 7s and below, where, you know, we got to put some titles on these horses below that, like gauge them a little bit. Like maybe they win the 3rd division. Well, maybe you know that horse fits a 6 better than an open guy, or maybe you know the helper messed up and it's still an open caliber horse. But at least puts them in a position where you can kind of at least market to the public on what that horse is. And that was kind of my idea behind the division thing, was nice, not necessarily put a title on them just for the hell of it, like put a title on them that places them in a category so we can market them a little bit better. Because in my opinion, like Miles said, you guys have 4 horses that may, like, you know, would have won it 4 years ago or whatever too. And then now, but you have a lot of people like me that are wanting to get into this right now. And maybe, you know, somebody like me can't ride the quickest footed horse, but can go show at my Futurity and place in a D against y'all. Well, that horse might be the more marketable horse in that. So that's kind of the issues that I was seeing with it, is like, how do we put the marketing on these horses that aren't the top end? Because they're still good horses in the long run, and maybe the more marketable horses.
Yeah, just because they don't win first or second at the Futurity
Yep.
doesn't mean that they don't have a place. Like he said, for the guys that don't need as much horse, or, I mean, sometimes the great horses that might go on to be the best rodeo horses weren't the best Futurity horses, you know, but they're getting seasoned in that process of Futurity, you know.
That's what's been the biggest help for me, because I was having to season them, you know, because of my number. Even though I wasn't rodeoing, I've got to season them at an open roping. That's just not fair to the horse. I mean,
Right.
now we're actually going and seeing where he measures up with his class.
You go to one place and ride all of them too.
Exactly.
Versus even
Yeah.
if you do have one that's ready for the open, you're having to go take Kent. You can only ride one that day, you know, and that's probably too much on him. And then these other 4 aren't getting exposed, and or you're having to trade off. There's no way you got 5 4-year-olds or probably could take the open like they need to at that level. So yeah, it lets them go compete at one spot, and you could ride all of them and season them.
And I like the dynamic of 4 judged Futurities and 2 time onlys for seasoning a horse too, because you're going to expose them to 2 different setups where you can either push them to their limit at the RFAs and the, what's the other time? Oh, Riata.
Riata. Mm-hmm.
And then the judge is like, okay, let's put it back to control. Like, let's go blitz them and see what their minds can take, and then let's get it back to control. It's kind of cool. It's interesting.
Well, there's something for everybody. I mean, Bob Harris has one in
Yep.
South Dakota that's judge only. You know, I think it's a great outing for a first outing, you know. So the industry has evolved, and like some of it will stay, some of it may drop off, but like it'll find what's needed because it'll stay around.
Right.
But just like
I think Bob's Futurity is cool because the rounds are on time, and then the judge only on the rest of it. So if you go out, you can go with the rounds on time, but the rest is judged. And I like that too. I think it's neat.
For just taking a 4-year-old first trip to town, you can't beat his.
This is awesome.
It's just it's at a time of the year where you've already taken them somewhere, you know, and so it's really probably a good place to take them, like where we've pressure tested some of them.
Yep.
Take them there, and you get to give them a good outing, you know, and be judged on something different than what we're used to, so we can go
Ride
to
'em
that
a little
spot.
different.
Yeah, we can
Yeah.
ride them different, more conservative, and
He's always got good steers, like good judges. It's a pretty good setup. That's a fun fraternity, really.
But when we're asking the different things from, everybody was talking about like the Equinity's everywhere now.
Yeah.
You know, and the title sponsor to the Platinum Futurity.
Platinum.
But like everybody's like, well, you're not rodeo anymore. You don't have old horses. What do you need? And but like when we're putting this much pressure on these horses, those amino acids are healing them, letting their bodies heal themselves faster, so that we're able to, when we do get done with this process that we're involved in till they're 6, then we don't find out that they're broke down in this area or this area when they go on to somebody like Patrick or Wesley. You know, like they got to be 100% to be able to take what they're taking. And I was under the misconception for so long that like that was just for old horses, that was just for this. But to know that you can go through the most critical time in their life and keep them, you know, repairing as you're training, that's been the big help for us in our program.
The recovery time is like you can continue, you can put more pressure on them as a trainer because the recovery time's faster. But like I think it's the product itself is one of the most beneficial products for the entire lifespan of a horse, because I use it in the breeding shed on the studs. Greatest thing we've ever invited in. We've been using it on our mares. Mares are settling better. I mean, literally from the beginning process of that horse's life down to the sperm cell to its end age. And like in the middle of the fertility process, like you're saying, you guys are able to put a little bit more pressure on them, or maybe you got to put an extra ride on them, and then they recover faster. So you're not having to do the injections, you're not having to give them time off. It helps with all of it.
it's getting to a point where it's so tough now to win. You're not gonna be able to cheat the training process and still go win if you want to win. And so in our world, where we probably haven't been the best industry for taking great care of our horses, it's going to have to change now. And it's changed a lot already, but that's going to become a huge part of this industry, as much as we're going to have to push them if you want to be competitive at the futurities.
Well, nobody could say that more than you, Trevor, probably when you started roping with me, being just a kid from West Texas, that, you know, if my horse got alfalfa, it was because we won something. As long, sometimes we both had to go without eating.
Yeah.
But the importance of that and seeing it, and I was telling John on the way in here that out of all the patches on my shirt, I literally I cannot tell you how many people come up to me and ask about Equinety because they think, you know, does it really work? You know, the old deal of you just getting paid to say this or whatever. And I tell everybody, they're like, what does it do? And you just try it. Put your horse on it and you tell me what you see, because what I've learned is kind of like what you're talking about, from starting from the very beginning to the end, is the hardest thing on them for us, is really not the roping. It's the hauling. Man, when they're on the road, drinking, eating, and I mean, some of these 18, 20-hour drives, and then they get right back in and go again, that's where I've noticed a difference in everything about my horses, the look, the feel. Like I said, recovery time, I was 3 for 3 before I started Equinety on soft tissue injuries on my 3 good horses. All of them were down at the same time. That's kind of when John and I met, and you know, proof's in the pudding. That's what I'll tell everybody. Put them on it, try it. Don't be those guys. Team ropers are notorious for, you know, like I said, the way you feed them, the rope tie or bread tie on the headstall.
Yeah, I was fixing to don't do that to your headstall.
It all goes hand in hand. But I think that is part of what the futurity, the whole evolution of our sport, and just the knowledge that's out there now, and the stuff that's on social media and being pushed by guys just like you guys in that industry, is helping the rodeo industry and helping us realize the importance of taking care of our horses and keeping things fit and in shape and giving them what they need. And I think that's gone. Nobody cared about 20 years ago when somebody called me about a hill horse. They did not ask about papers. They didn't. Can I catch on him is all that mattered. And now that is really changing. It's one of the first questions I get is, how's he bred? And with the Riata buckle, with everything else that's going on. And I think that all of that tying in together with taking care of them, keeping them looking good. Because if you go in there with some of the stuff that I used to ride, I mean, they might think I was there to hang
You're
the
not talking
banners. I
about the
wasn't
gray,
actually
are you?
So, but no, it's true. It's a game changer for these horses.
So like on the supplement side for Jordan and I's program, our program's pretty unique being that we're running barrels and roping. So they're getting twice the riding sometimes. And then she runs poles on them, will break well on them. Like we're selling, yeah, it's great to have a horse that goes on to the elite level, but most horses make college rodeo, high school rodeo, junior high rodeo horses. And as expensive as those horses have gotten, people are starting to do 5 events again on a horse, because if they can go buy one horse that they can head or heel breakaway, run barrels and poles, maybe a go town, they're going to spend a little bit more money to buy that horse. Well, I was kind of like you on the supplements, like that's for old horses years ago, because it's like, well, we don't really have problems. We keep our horses turned out, we ride them, we keep them balanced, try to keep them fit, they don't get injuries. And then you sell horses and they come back and they've got a box as big as this table with every kind of supplement, and they're just there for a tune-up. I'm like, I don't have enough time in the day to feed this one horse all these supplements. Well, Equinety's got 2 things. Like, it's simple for me to go feed 25 or 30 horses those same 2 things. And then again, just their recovery and all that, when we're running barrels and roping on them, we're not just roping on them. They need help to stay up to their game.
What's really fascinating from my side is when we first got into the Western industry, more on the barrels, and I was always told, just stay away from the ropers. You know, they're not gonna do this, but that has dramatically changed in the last 3 years.
I've had more 3, 4s, and 5s at schools and lessons come over to ask about Equinety. I mean, when you get the number 9 paying $200,000 a man, I mean, they're wanting to give Snowflake whatever it takes to make him compete at his best. So I think that, I mean, that has changed a lot. I mean, just from the papers to the horse care to the whole 9 yards of giving them the best shot they can. Because, I mean, it's a hobby, but when you back in the box for $200,000 a man, I mean, that's serious.
I mean, it's one thing for one of you top guys, when your horse goes down, you've got the skill set to kind of mold to whatever horse you get on next. I mean, as long as they check up enough boxes, you can catch on them. But like you said earlier, I don't care if you're going to the number 8 roping at Las Vegas, like if you've got a 20-year-old horse, and no matter what age that horse is at, if he goes down, you may not ever have that success again, because it may have been more of a fit than people realize. And that's what they learn about great horses, is you learn more about great horses once you don't have them anymore than you ever did when you had them. And so it's just good to take it from other people that have learned the hard way to start taking care of them now.
To be straight, it's like I was spoiled, and Justin knows what I grew up roping on, and it was maybe one of the greatest horses I've ever rode. Like, roped calves on it, heeled on it. It ruined me, because then I had to figure out, like, I was never going to get to that again. But I didn't know enough back then, to like understand that. Go work for Dakota, come down here, got not some great stuff, and it helped elevate my riding. But also back to that was my partner, man. And once he was gone, it took me a long time to get even get to where I was roping good enough, because I was kind of spoiled.
I think that something a lot of people need to understand, because horses are so expensive, that, I mean, not that I'm a pro, but I do give lessons and try to help people along, and people go give a lot for a horse. Well, they give a lot for a horse, they want to be able to run steers on them, a lot, because they bought him. And I'm like, a guy come and didn't buy a horse for me, but tried one at the house, and he's like, well, now I need to sell the other horse I have. And I'm like, no, you need to keep that horse. Like, you learned on him. He already has, maybe a few bad habits, but like, keep him and get your reps on him. And now this horse that you just bought that's better, like, try to get some good reps and then put him up and save
Try not to
him.
make that horse just like the other horse.
Yeah, protect that investment. And then also too, like, you need to be able to ride both of those horses, so that also too, if you just have one horse, like, how many times you like find something you don't like and you just like get tunnel vision and you're like, I'm gonna fix that right there, and then you create all these other habits. Well, if this new horse, maybe he has something you don't like, but he's still way better than your other horse, you're gonna let that go as long as it's not detrimental to the run, and you're not gonna pick at him. You know what I mean? I'm like, it's not gonna do anything but help your new horse to keep your old horse, because then you're gonna maybe feel some things out of your new horse that you get better habits in your old horse, and then you know what I'm saying? Just keep that balance, and you don't just waste these horses.
Yeah, and two, with it as expensive as these horses are getting, and then as we were talking about taking care of them the best way you can. That's where, I mean, we're going on 10 years on the market now, but even, because recently it's more into the futurity with the product, but in getting into the older horses, I mean, the recovery, the stamina, they're not, 20 to 40% is typically what people are saving. We hear this all the time, whether it be through less injections or less other supplement stuff. I mean, they kind of figure that out just because the horses move better, feel better, look better all the way around. But like, what have you guys noticed specifically in the younger horses?
Just recovery time.
Focus.
Yeah, because when you ride a 3 or 4 year old 6 days a week or 7 days a week, you know how they feel every time you get on. If you're good at what you do, you can tell everything they're feeling, everything they're thinking. You're on them so consistently that you know when they're sore. You know, it's no different than us. By Saturday, wake up, done it all week, your little sore horses are the same. And it's like that with the horses. You can tell a difference.
So like that's something I take into account too in our deal as far as keeping horses. It's like, all right, you figure out which ones are the most talented pretty quick. You figure out which ones are trainable, but then you're like, okay, is this horse gonna take hauling? Like, and what can I do to? It doesn't do me any good if I train this horse to the highest level, and then he just can't take the hauling. You know, I see that in the barrel racing side. I see that a lot. Horses just mentally don't take, maybe they didn't do the prep work, or maybe they did, they got them super broke, super trained, and then they just like, you know, ulcers and just all the stuff, and it's like, well, that horse is no good anymore. You know, as far as to take those miles, they need to be feeling good when they leave, because again, like you said, you're not getting to stay in one place very long. You're not getting to let those horses rest. They're getting a lot of miles. They need to have the right stuff going into their body so that they withstand that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times too, if people aren't used to using supplements, and there's some people that just aren't supplement fans for whatever reason, and they're never looking for anything until they're looking for something. But when it comes down to it, what we've seen through the years, a lot of people, you know, something goes wrong with the horse, they're looking for something, come across a Equinety, more times than not, it fixes them. Well, my horse is fixed, and they stop using it. Well, the problem with that is they're going to revert back to whatever issues they had. So people are starting to figure out using it over the lifetime of the horse, which is what you were talking about earlier, because of the preventative aspects of it. And even, I mean, what we found through the years with an injured horse, whatever the time frame of recovery is, they always come back ahead of schedule, 100% of the time.
Well, I mean, I'm just gonna use Mr. Sassy for anything as an example here. It's like, I didn't even know he was on anything, and his semen jumped up 50% last year. Well, Tyler Wade had sent it up for Dad to try for his hawk, and then we kind of figured out the semen thing in the process, but on account of it helps heal at a cellular level, healed his hawk faster, so his body was healed, then the semen count started coming back in because cells were repairing, not worrying about the hawk. So it's so beneficial in how it helps heal in different areas with that cell recovery, and it's just the overall side of it is just kind of amazing. What one scoop of powder can do for your whole horse.
Well, it's so unique because, you know, typically you look in the supplement industry and it's like you have this issue, there's a supplement for that. You have that issue, there's a supplement for that. Next thing you know, you've got the whole box of everything. So the unique thing with the aminos that we have is it specifically designed to stimulate the pituitary gland, which is the master gland in the body, and that releases hormones and just allows the horse to send its own hormones to its own problem areas. So you could have 50 horses with 50 different things going on, all different ages, and it's going to customize to each one. Although there's going to be commonalities with all of them, the slipped out coat and, you know, quality hooves and joints and all those kinds of things too.
That's what I like, that it kind of makes that horse go through a checklist, fix themselves. Again, versus like the person that brings you the tub of supplements and this fixes this and this fixes that, and it's like we don't really know what works. You know? It's nice to have one that kind of goes through there and balances their body out. And again, it goes back to what you're talking about of why you're training rope horses from scratch versus buying rejects. Well, that you're trying to prevent problems coming up in their training later. Well, the Equinety, we're not just treating, we're preventing problems coming up later. Like, why would we want to spend all this time training these horses and then something happens that we could have prevented and now we don't get to go use them? So that's the other, I mean, we're just trying to take out barriers.
Right. No.
They're never done with us. Or most industries are done after their futurity years. When ours are done after their futurity years, they're just getting started. Like now they go on to guys that are rodeoing or guys that are gonna World Series them or, you know, whatever it is.
I would like to just touch on something about the importance of having somebody like you two or Justin be the ones that put that good foundation on them. So when the people are ready for their weekends, they can just get on and go roping.
Yeah.
And they've had a chance to
They
get
go
their
out.
investment off them back already.
Well, if they can handle the conditions they get put under in the futurity world, they can handle about anything later, 3 years of that.
This is the biggest thing people are gonna have to get over, is I don't need a 6-year-old. And I mean, some people don't, and especially if they're a repurposed 6-year-old. But if they've been brought up, like say, shown their 4-year-old year, shown their 5-year-old year, shown their 6-year-old year, I can't tell you how much more solid some of my 4-year-olds are that we're riding now than 8-year-olds used to be in the past. You know, that's what people don't understand. It's the horse's journey that makes him, if he's the right fit or not the age.
Yeah.
Well, and how cool is it too that you can track that horse from its 4 to 6-year-old years, so you know what kind of animal that is to place them with the person. And that's the best part, I think, about it. Like you're saying, it might not have got to that point till it was 8 before, and it might have been you were trying to train that for fully open caliber. Well, now you have the opportunity to ride these horses for 2 years and kind of decide what they're going to be and who to place them with. And it helps you.
The other thing I don't think we've like touched on much is like how often Team Roper's been scared of mares in the past. And now, I mean, I'd almost prefer having a good mare than I would a gelding, you know, because like everybody's run from, they'll call you, you know, well, I got a good mare, and they're, you know, they run from you. But now, I mean, I think people are going to be way more interested with maturities, with the breeding, with the more organization of our sport, that mares are going to become way more valuable. I mean, they've already started to become way more valuable.
Back
I
to
mean,
what we talked about on the setting the foundation of the breeding, like if you have a mare that's good, undeniable, like, man, what's good in the roping? Well, Thorpe won 500,000.
Do you think the earnings, like the mare doing well, has to have a good set of papers with it, or do you think just the mare doing well speaks for itself?
His performance.
It's like a big old shotgun blast. So just let's see what's going to work.
Yeah, like we're literally like, let's see what works. And then like for us on the breeding stuff, we broke it down. Like he's seen it, like just the straight race horses. Sometimes they can't structurally handle using their butt as much as we need to. Like they may come apart in their hind end. And then we've seen cutters, a lot of them can't run enough, or they're too cowy in the heeling, and then
They have too much draw.
yeah, too much draw, and then the reiner's like, sometimes they don't react fast enough to the bridle reins, regardless of how you train them. Like sometimes you can't undo genetics, so we've took it to a whole nother level in trying to breed studs. Like we want a stud that, you know, has the structure that, you know, a lot of times that they'll get, you know, big stout ranch horse that maybe isn't fast enough, but he's built to hold up. And we've just played with that until the point where like we found horses that like, okay, this horse is built to hold up. He can use his butt, he can run enough. And then when we put him on a runner that maybe couldn't structurally hold up, they're gonna hold up. It's just been a whole new like evolution of trying to figure out what we're gonna look back in 10 years and be like, hey, that was like the metallic cat, or, you know, whatever.
That
it may
was the
be.
standard of that event.
Yeah.
It's so cool because we're at the beginning stages.
Yeah, we're getting to
It's
kind of
fun.
right history.
But they gotta be big and strong enough to hold up, and then they gotta have a good stride. And I think that carries over into like the barrel deal that me and Jordan talk about a lot. It's like, okay, it's great if they can run fast, but how fast can they get running fast? And how fast can they
Break their stride.
come back? And it's like, we talked about it in her world, like, in my opinion, her horse, he slows down and speeds up in the same frame. Well, he doesn't have to drastically change his frame to change his stride. And so when you start talking about playing with your breeding, like, I think that's something that we all have to keep in mind, because it's great, you want this fast horse, but can he react to the situation? Or then we got this horse that's got a great stride, but he can't catch up, or whatever, so that's what kind of what you're talking about. I think it's,
on that too is Blazing Jet Lead is half cow, half run. Like one way, I don't care what way you look at it, Frenchman's guys half cow, half run. There are stallions that have produced not the fastest barrel horse, but barrel horses that are more athletic and have that rate, have that shutdown. That kind of does transfer over the team roping a little bit. But really it comes down to personal preference and who'd ride them in the long run and what they want in that horse. So that's where we kind of get to experiment with it and see what we get out of it. But Rolo, I'd say one of the greatest barrel horses I've ever seen in my life. Half cow, half run. When it's all said and done, maybe a little bit more 3/4 run, but you know what I'm saying.
But that type of horse will come out of everything that's happening in this industry. That when we find what we consider a great head horse, I think he's going to be a great barrel horse. I think you're going to be able to heal on him. I think the horse that has the attributes,
Versatility.
yeah.
that's what I want. I want
Something that
a horse can do
we've
both
lost
things.
because everything else got so narrow along the way.
Pigeonhole, yeah.
Yeah.
You might see more like what we call good head horses. I think will come more good barrel horses out of it than what are now, just because there's so much more controlled at the foundation of how they get started. But I mean, time will tell. But I could see more barrel horses coming out of what we're trying to breed as head horses than what are coming out of barrel horses and how they're getting started.
When I moved down here, he preached that to me like it was going out of business. You rope on your barrel horses. He gives them a job. Like, he's one of the first people that ever taught me that.
Yeah.
And like, look at how successful their program's been.
Well, what I'm trying to find, not every horse is going to be an elite head horse and heel horse. Like, there's very few that can do both great. But take me, for example. I probably want one that's going to be better at heading that I can heel on also.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I'm looking for. And I've got some mares now to where I'm taller. I can't go ride a little bitty heel horse and I kind of look silly on them. So, like, I want a horse that's got more size, but still got some stop, still got the speed to be a head horse.
Don't you guys have one for sale?
Well, so you can take the exact same size horse, exact same genetics. It's no different than being right-handed and left-handed, in my opinion. Some horses have a more head to the left frame, and some horses are more comfortable head to the right and using their shoulders and ribs at a different angle. But like, I think that's as much of it as, like, I've had to have horses that were natural heel horses where their full brother would have been a natural head horse. It's to me, it's no different than being left-handed and right-handed. They can do both, but naturally they're going to be better at one than the other person.
But for sure, I
Yeah.
want the options.
I know size-wise too.
And especially for me, when you own your own horses, if they're hill horse size and they don't make a hill horse,
Yeah.
well, you've lost, right? So in my deal, we're breeding more barrel horses. I'm starting to breed more rope horses just based on where I'm trying to go. But if they don't make a barrel horse, they might make a head horse, or they might make a hill horse, and that gives me an avenue to still make a living. The goal is to make a living with horses. What that is different with every horse. And I think that's the other cool thing about the futurity world is whatever they excel at, we buy this horse and we hope he's a head horse. Well, maybe he's a better heel horse, like you said. Well, that gives me that option. But if I buy him and hope he's a head horse and he don't make and he ain't a heel horse either, well, I've lost money. And then, so that's kind of where I'm looking for that horse that has the possibilities to do 2 or 3 things, hoping he's just really good at one of them.
My goal with everything right now is to breed a 15-hand stacked horse that is built good with a good conformation. Like, I want to breed a stud that's 15-2 to a mare that's 14-3 and hope for the middle. Like, my goal is to set a horse up to be 15 hands because I feel like that's a place where you can put them where they want and they're going to show you what they're going to be. Or you can do both. But that's a personal preference.
And rodeo, and I thought I used to like a short stride horse, but they were quick. As I transitioned throughout, especially in the heading, and even in the timing roping, I liked a more medium to long stride horse because they were more forgiving in the long run. When you're going, and you can't, like Weston said, when you're not going back home every week just to stay, like, short stride feels really good when it's in control and you're able to manage it, but when it's not forgiving. And so I learned some of that some of that length of stride isn't always a negative at all. It's personal preference, but I think there's longevity and forgiveness for sure as far as stride goes.
All right, well, I hope you all enjoyed this talk about the rope horse industry, the futurity industry, the rodeo industry. I feel like it's been a great talk, and it's kind of exciting to see how far the horse markets came in the last 6 months and kind of where it's headed. And it's a really exciting time to be a part of this industry, and we hope you enjoyed it.